This short video provides you with an overview of the Wales safeguarding procedures as they're laid out using the app. In particular, we'll be focusing on the content relating to children and young people at risk of harm. And this video in particular will be concentrating on section 3 of the procedures. As we go into the main contents page of the procedures, you will see that section 3 is laid out in 2 parts. And this video will be covering both parts of section 3. So to begin with, we'll go into section 3, part 1, which covers the detail in relation to responding to a report of a child at risk of harm, abuse and/or neglect. So we click into section 3, where you're greeted then with the main contents page, which covers the content contained within section 3 of the procedures. Click into the overview of the section. This will set out the main content that will be covered within this section of the procedures. Where we see the shaded box, we can click on that text and it will bring up a description or a definition of what is meant by the word or the term that is highlighted. So you can see the example here is the description of social services. Where we see then bold text, we can click on the bold text. So if we click on significant harm, which you can see is highlighted in bold text, it then takes us to the relevant page in the procedures that provides us with the description and further information of what is meant by significant harm. To get back to the main contents page, we can either click the back arrow button at the top or on the small narrative in green at the top of the page that says back to responding to a report of a child at risk of harm, abuse or neglect. This section then contains information around the response that needs to be provided by the local authority when a report is made to them about concerns about a child at risk. And as you can see, the detail then contains the task that needs to be followed, any information that will be gathered by the person making the report. Some pointers for practice, as you can see, this one in particular is around eliciting information following the report. And then it carries on talking about the information that will need to be gathered. Scroll back up to the top of the page. And we can click either the back arrow or the narrative that says back to responding to a report of a child at risk. There's the information then around the steps that will be taken in relation to initial checks and decisions to be made by social services. We also then have information about how children and families will need to be engaged during initial checks and discussions. So if we click into there, you can see the requirements in relation to seeing the child on the same day that the report is made. The steps that need to be taken in terms of informing the child and family of the report, which also includes information about when this may not be appropriate. The shaded boxes you can see in grey there, providing some examples to set some context to the requirements that are described in the procedures. Again, some more pointers for practice that will help in terms of clarifying the detail and informing some practitioners' approach to their engagement of children and young people. Scroll back up to the top of the page. Click on the back button. We then find information, for example, around immediate protection and urgent action and the steps that need to be taken. This section also contains the detail around the strategy discussion or meeting that is to be held. So if we click into there, we see a description of the legal requirements around holding the strategy discussion or meeting. The descriptions then within this section of the purpose of the strategy discussion or meeting. If I scroll down, information that will help determine whether it's a strategy meeting or discussion that is to take place. some key pointers for practice around making those discussions and meetings child-centered, information about the timescales, the processes that are being followed, participation, and so on. From the strategy, discussion, or meeting, the decision may be made that it is necessary to conduct Section 47 inquiries. And as you can see, there are a number of sections within this part of the procedures that covers the key information, the key considerations, the stages that need to be taken when conducting those Section 47 inquiries. So if we click, for example, into key considerations, there's a description of the process that needs to be followed, which includes some key questions that practitioners should be asking through that process. If I click into the pointer for practice, questions to consider as part of the Section 47 inquiries, scroll back up to the top. Again, there's some more information, some more detail that will help to guide individuals' practice. Click on the back button to go back again, and we're into the main contents page for this part of the procedures. Further information about analysis and decision making, what information needs to be recorded, and you can see at the bottom there, the expectations and guidance around working with the child and family during the Section 47 inquiries. Some helpful definitions and descriptors in these sections, which includes, for example, the one relating to child focused. So if I click the shaded box, then we get a description of what is meant by being child focused within these procedures. Click on the back arrow and back to the main content of Section 3, Part 1. If I then click back again, so back to children and young people at risk of harm, I come into the main contents page for the children at risk procedures. So I'll now go into Section 3, Part 2, which covers decision making and initial child protection conferences. Click into Section 3, Part 2. Once again, we have the main contents page, which includes the overview of the section. The overview of the section gives you the descriptions of the contents that will then be covered. Click on the back arrow. We have the information then around the determinations that need to be reached out of the Section 47 inquiries. So it sets the narrative in terms of the context of making those decisions, offers up the information about the determinations that need to be reached out of the Section 47 inquiries, some key pointers to inform the decision making and which of those determinations is most appropriate. As you can see for this particular section, there are lots of pointers for practice that are noted that will help to guide the decision making and the analysis that takes part in the Section 47 inquiry process. If I scroll back up to the top, click back, I then find the information about the initial child protection conference. And as you can see, there are a number of parts to this section that covers the detail in relation to the initial child protection conference. So if I click into the initial child protection conference section, it talks about the purpose of the task and what the tasks of practitioners are, timings, who's expected to attend. Keep scrolling down. Some pointers for practice around attending the child protection conferences. These are covered in the videos supporting each part of the section. Again, there's the information around preparing reports for conference. So those of you who attend the initial child protection conference and are expected to provide a report, this is a helpful section that gives you the information that you will need to make sure is contained in any report that you present to that initial conference. I click back. This section also then talks about the Child Protection Register. Scroll back up to the top. The purpose of the register, the process that needs to be followed, the consequences of placing a child's name on the register, and so on. Scroll back up. I can go back. There's then information about the outline care and support protection plan that needs to be developed. Once the decision is made to place a child's name on the Child Protection Register. So if I was to click into the outline care and support protection plan, scroll back up to the top, it sets the legal context for having to develop that plan, and then the information contained in this part of the procedures then covers what needs to be contained in the plan, the timescales, and so on. Click back. I then also see roles and responsibilities and the other tasks for the initial Child Protection Conference. So it's those tasks that are in addition to the decision to place a child's name on the register and the development of the initial plan. If I've clicked into there, I can then see the additional tasks that are described in the procedures. Click back, come to the contents page of section 3, part 2, and if I click back in, I get back to the main contents page for the children at risk procedures.